Hi, welcome to NDE TV. I'm Peggy Robinson. Today's guest is Ken Leth, and he's going to tell us about his near death experience. Hi, Ken.
Hi there. How are you today?
Good. So feel free to just start wherever you like.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Um, wow. All right. When I was 8 years old, living in Nebraska, um, I came home from school not feeling too good one day and got real sick at the dinner table. And there was a fever, vomiting involved, that kind of stuff. And it was in the early November, late October when it happened. So my parents at first just assumed it was the flu because it was going around. So yeah, I had to leave the dinner table and all that, and they kept me home. It seems like they kept me home for about a week and a half total, but I don't know. I My memory may not be quite accurate on that. There were calls to the doctor as well in a very small town in Nebraska, and I think he agreed with them that it sounded like the flu. Um, I couldn't keep any fluids down at all. Water, orange juice, nothing. I mean, it immediately aggravated my vomiting. As it turns out, it was an appendicitis. And
Same thing as the the book, movie, Heaven is for Real. That's what that boy died was
yeah,
appendicitis.
and I'm not sure, but they might be from Nebraska as well. I'm not positive.
Okay.
I don't really know much about them, and I don't have the book. um, but I thought it was interesting that he too, the little boy, had a problem with his appendix. So a lot of fever, not feeling good at all. My parents' home was, well, it was, I mean, we were comfortable, but it wasn't what you'd consider a large home. So um, I pretty much occupied the couch and watched TV from there. And the rest of the family just tried to not get too close to me because they didn't want to get the flu as well. So sickness went on for about a week or so. And my mother, she stayed with me. See, dad worked on the road. He was a surveyor, so he was called out on his job. He had to leave for the week. And my mother stayed home with me. But there was one day when her boss called up and said that, please, 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 begged her to come into work. So I was left alone for like an afternoon. And I woke up on the couch. I was so thirsty because I hadn't been drinking any water. I woke up so thirsty. I thought I was just going to die right there. It was, if you've never really had an extreme thirst, maybe you don't know what it's like, but it's not pleasant. So I forced myself to get up, and I managed to get over to the kitchen sink, which wasn't too far away. Took a drink of water, and before I could finish drinking it, oh, it tasted fantastic, by the way. But before I could get the full glass of water down, I passed out. And I woke up on the floor. Everything went white. I remember everything just went white. My vision just faded, like a colored vision, just faded to black and white. And then it was nothing but just, it was like a brilliant white light. And eventually I came back though, and I crawled on my hands and knees back to the couch. And about that time, my mother came home, from work. And while I was back on the couch, I kind of turned because I wasn't comfortable, and I felt something kind of pop or move in my gut. It was a real odd feeling. Um, but the crazy thing is, immediately I felt better. So I wanted to get up and play. I felt that good. And my mother insisted that I don't, because I guess I looked really bad. So she kept me home like one more day. And then the next morning, she took a look at me, and I guess I was just transparent. I was so white. She put me in the car and took me up to the doctor. I don't even think she had an appointment. She just took me up to him. He took one look at me and knew immediately that something was serious. Um, so I remember a lot of real fast talking and my mother asking questions, and I didn't really care because I felt so bad. And he sent me up to the hospital, and it was a small town county hospital. So it was only just a few blocks away. But he insisted that my mother take me there immediately. And so we get to the hospital, and, the nurses are all ready for me and rushed me into a room and dressed me into a gown. And I remember they shaved my stomach with razor blades, well, a man's razor and shaving cream. I was 8 years old. And I'm like, I don't have any hair in my belly. My dad did, but I didn't. And they were kind of laughing about it, but that's when they said something about you're going to have an operation and we have to get all the hair off your skin. And that was the first indication I had that something serious was going on. They tried to protect me and not really explain it, but something about the word operation kind of told me something was up. Then it was just go, go, go. And my mother was frantic. She wanted to tell my dad, but he was on the road. And in 1963, there were no cell phones. So she was going back and forth from the front office trying to make phone calls to get a hold of my dad. And nurses came, put me on a gurney, rolled me out of the room. I saw my mom at the end of the hallway and I was bawling, so scared. Got me into the operating room. And then I was tied down to a table with straps really tight. And then they used ether, small town hospital. I guess in those days, maybe the modern stuff they use now with shots, I don't know, maybe it didn't exist. But
I remember that ether when I was little and got my tonsils out. I still remember that smell.
you remember smell. See, I've read about it and supposedly it has no smell. You can't tell me that. It
Uh-uh.
stunk.
I smell it. I can still smell it when I think about it.
Yeah,
Strong.
I've smelled it like in a can of paint, the aerosol. I
Hmm.
can smell it and it makes me kind of, I don't feel good when I smell it. But so yeah, they used ether. So I was terrified as they put me down because I really didn't know what was going on. So when the ether first hit me, it made me extremely dizzy. And it honestly felt like my body was stationary like a planet and my head became an orbiting like a moon. And I felt my head going around and around and around my body until finally it just broke loose. And then, like that. And then everything went black. And I don't know how long I was in that blackness, but there came a point when I had the realization that I could still think. I was still me. And I had that realization. It was like, kind of like I told myself, I can think, so I'm still me. So I started to try to assess my situation and where was I? I was real curious about it. And I remember hearing a voice of some kind, and it sounded like an authority figure, but I couldn't see where it came from. This voice asked me if I wanted to live or die. Um, I've never heard anyone else ever say something like that, but that's what I do recall. Well, 8 years old, and I was still me. I could still think. So, of course, I chose to live. That's what I wanted. Um, so, yeah, I chose to live. And then that sort of set everything in motion. And then after that, I started to realize that I couldn't see anymore. I couldn't hear anymore. Not really hear. I think that voice just sort of came to me in my head. It wasn't something I could hear. And I wanted all my faculties back. I wanted to look at myself. And so eventually my vision started to clear and I could see things again. And I could see myself. I was floating in this darkness and I was wispy. I could see through my arm. I could see through, you know, things. And it took a while. I don't really know how long I was alone in that darkness because it was comfortable and I was okay, but I kept wanting to know more. Like, I was real curious, like, why am I here? What is going on? That sort of thing. I felt no pain. At first, there was no fear, but that did come to me later. Um, I started realizing that I wasn't alone. And I saw like sets of eyes in the distance. And they were like, at first, it was just a couple of eyes, and then it was several. But they were acting kind of covert, like they were hiding from me. And there was a barrier. I could tell there was a barrier way out far away from me where they sat. And it was like that barrier was darker than the place that I occupied. And I was curious about them. And I started to look at them real close. And I was like asking myself, what's going on here? They started to resemble animals like in a forest or something. That's the correlation I made. Then I entertained fear because I wasn't sure. I didn't know what they were. As soon as they could recognize my thoughts, they knew what I was thinking. As soon as they recognized that I was a little bit fearful, they got stronger, and then they came after me. And just like Howard Storm, if you're familiar with him, he was attacked, and I was too.
Oh.
But what Howard describes, it almost sounded sexual in some places, but in some ways, but it wasn't like that for me. It was more they were having fun beating me down. And the entities that came after me, they sounded like children, just like me. Um, they were delighted that I was scared, and then they would torture me. They would hit me and bump me, and they could fly and I couldn't. And they'd fly around me, and then they kind of hit me in the shoulder, and I'd spin. And they'd laugh. Their whole thing was they were going to destroy me, tear me down to nothing. That's all they wanted. There's no heart, no love, no forgiveness, no nothing, just hate. And I sensed it, and I was terrified.
That's all they wanted was
It's
the.
all, yeah. It was like a base animal emotion. It's like eating or breathing. That's what it was like for them. So I can imagine if they exist in the darkness all the time, that's what they're dealing with ongoing, always. So if they're not attacking something, something is attacking them. And I think that must be hell. I
Might
must
be
have
a
been,
Facebook.
well, I I might have been right at the doorway, right at the edge of hell, I think, is where I was. The reason I could not defend myself and move away, I had a cord attached to my spiritual existence that went all the way down into the operating room in my body. I could actually follow, I could see the cord, I could watch it or look at it and kind of follow it down. And I knew that my body was attached to it down below. So these entities, they just beat me up something terrible. And I was just so terrified, a little child, not knowing what's going on anyway. At some point, I was wishing that they would stop hitting me and just leave me alone. I'd say, leave me alone. And they would laugh and imitate my voice. So it was like, I'm not so sure that they could understand English. They understood my thoughts. But when they imitated my voice, And believe it or not, it felt like my voice. It sounded foreign. Um, and then at one point, it was just so bad. I finally said something like, please, God, make them stop. And then they got more angry and they threatened me even more. They told me to shut up. And I wouldn't. I just kept calling out for help. And eventually I heard a voice way off in the distance, only this time the voice was very kind. I could just tell it was gentle. And it was from somebody that really gave a darn, you know? So I kept calling back, I'm down here, I'm down here. Well, the closer this other voice got, the more angry these other entities got. And then eventually they took off and ran away because I suddenly realized they were scared. And calling out for help, they didn't like it, but I guess it changed things. So they weren't in control anymore. So the source of that voice, I believe, was an angel, and it sure looked like an angel. It was a man, and he had a long, white, flowing robe. But I believe he had like a belt around the middle, and attached to the belt was a sword, believe it or not. And then he had a strap over his shoulder, and he had a long horn that was attached to the shoulder strap. I don't recall his face, but I remember him being very pleasant looking, just a very nice man. So he asked me what I was doing there, and I explained to him that I was having an operation. And he asked me why I didn't go up. I guess I left out the part where I did see some other spirits leaving Earth and going up past me and those other spirits, or those angry entities that attacked me. I saw spirits on Earth, and I think they were passing away because they looked like grandparents, old gray-haired people. So I knew that when somebody died on Earth, maybe from sickness, when their soul left their bodies, I saw them leave and then go immediately up to, like, they were searching for something, but they also looked very happy, and they almost looked like they were protected because of their belief. Strange, but true. So this angel came to me and asked me how come I wasn't going up. So I explained that I have this cord. So he looked down into the operating room, and he came back and said, things aren't going so well. So he stayed and talked to me for a while and protected me. He had the ability to pull out my past life up to that point, because he asked me something about, did you call out to God? And I told him yes. And he asked me who God was, and I couldn't really tell him, but I did tell him that that I'd been going to church and Sunday school, through my parents. And so he looked at my past life, and he found a moment when I was in church really little, and I guess my Sunday school class were putting on a concert or something, and I was singing "Jesus Loves Me" in front of the congregation with all these other kids. And it was funny because one of the boys, and I still remember his name, Bobby, I went to grade school with him. He's one of those kids, or if something wasn't right, he had to correct me. He just couldn't let it go. And he was stopping me in front of the whole congregation, telling me I wasn't singing it right. I didn't have the right words. And the congregation was laughing. They're getting a big kick out of it. Well, then this angel, he's watching this too, and he got a big kick out of it. He thought it was great. So, it was kind of a nice moment there of sharing. But eventually we got serious again, and he was like, we got to do something with you. We're going to have to take care of you. And so he had me try to jump and go up like the others, and I just couldn't do it. I couldn't if there was a way for me to release myself from that cord, I didn't know how. So then he started talking up above me, and I somehow understood he was talking up to where those other spirits had gone. I somehow knew that. And when he would talk up, he was using a language I didn't understand. And when I looked up after he would say something, there was kind of a glow up there. When I looked up, it was kind of a golden yellow, beautiful glow up there. So I do remember asking him, what are you saying? Or what are you asking? And he said, they, or whoever he was talking to up, he said, they're looking for your family. They're trying to find out who you belong to up there. So I believe he was referring to heaven. And then eventually he said, okay, everything's set, everything's ready to go. So he said, I'm being called to another place. I can't stay here with you anymore. He said, but I need to protect you. So he took out his sword and he cut my cord. And he put me in like a bubble. It almost felt like it was plastic, but it was big enough that I could move around in it. And it was clear, I could see through it. And he said, I'm going to send you up like all the others, and you'll be safe now. Don't be scared. Everything's fine. So, and I trusted him completely because he was just, you know, a little kid, you can just tell when you're with somebody that's good, you just know it. So I was okay with everything then. So eventually my bubble was going up and I was leaving the planet. I remember looking down and I could see like, well, as I got far enough away, when you could see like a whole country, I could see lights, you know, like from like cities and all that. And I just kept going up and up and up. And I remember seeing stars, tremendous collections of stars. And I remember saying to myself, these must be galaxies. This must be what they look like. Only I got to see it for real, you know, up front. It was, boy, it was beautiful. Sorry, I got my tea here.
That's okay.
I have to have my tea. I'm an old guy. So I'm going up and up and up, and eventually I noticed that I wasn't alone, and that there was a collection of stars beyond us. I wasn't alone because I was with other people that had come up off the planet. So I somehow understood that they must have died, and I guess I died too. And we were coming like up through some like channels together, but there was like 3, 4, maybe 5 different channels, and they looked like tubes almost. And I looked around and I was surrounded by people. And I think one guy that was close to me, I think he was from like Asia. He spoke, he was speaking, and I didn't understand a thing that he said, but I could tell by the tone of his voice that he was very happy. And then, so we got closer to this collection of stars way up above us, and it was a spiral, and I could see that it was spinning. And it turns out it wasn't a galaxy, and it wasn't stars inside it. It was people. Each one of us in these channels, we kind of glowed a little bit like a little star, like a ball of light.
Were you still in that bubble?
I was still in the bubble, yeah. And then, so we got inside that spiral. It turned out to be a tunnel. And that tunnel, in my case, it was almost like it almost operated like a machine. It sorted people. So that Asian guy that was close to me, he got sorted out and moved over somewhere else. And I got separated and moved somewhere else. And eventually I was all by myself again. I remember lots of brilliant colors, like a royal blue and emerald green, beautiful colors, ruby red. they would go past me as I moved. And there were times when it was almost like a roller coaster. It would kind of go up and down. I don't know why, but it wasn't frightening at
Was there
all.
any sound?
I do remember voices of people sounding excited and happy, almost like an amusement park. Weird, but that's what it was. But by the time I got to the end of the tunnel and I was separated from everybody else, it was pretty quiet. So I get to the end and I get spit out of the tunnel. And I realize that I'm still in my bubble. My bubble is slowly floating up. And I went up to like a barrier. Um, it resembled a bank of clouds. And when my bubble got up to that barrier, it just stopped. It just sat there like something hard had stopped me. Um, and I sat there for a minute, just kind of wondering what was going to happen next when suddenly two arms reached down through the cloud, grabbed me like on either side of my shoulders, and just lifted me up and set me down. And I was standing next to a man that was about the same age as my dad, and I didn't know who he was. And he didn't know who I was. And we talked back and forth. He was really nice. I mean, he wanted me to be okay. And he was like very happy go lucky and don't worry. And you're okay now, that kind of stuff. Although I don't really remember excuse me, I don't remember entertaining any kind of fear, but I was curious as to why all this was happening. Eventually he just gave up. He couldn't figure out who I was. And he said, well, I think he said either my parents or my grandparents are up here, and maybe they can help us out. So he took me up to them. It was an older set of people. And then another set of people joined. And I remember in particular two older women. They asked me a lot of questions. And finally, it came down to, what is your name? And I told them my name is Kenneth. And it was, what's your last name? And I said, Leth. Well, then the women got excited and they were like, oh, we know that name. And they were like, well, who's your father? And I said, my dad's name is Lyle. Well, those two older women, they go, well, he's our grandson. Your father is our grandson.
Huh.
So they were my great grandparents, great grandmothers. It turns out they were both on my dad's side of the family. So my living grandma and grandpa Lett, it was their parents. Actually, if you don't mind, I'll show you. I'll show you a picture of grandma, great grandma, and grandpa Lett. Here you go. I keep this on the wall. I'm very proud of it. Um, I've met some. My family's from Denmark. We're homesteaders, and I've met some distant Danish relatives from Denmark, and they took one picture of my great grand, or they took one look at my great grandpa, and they go, "All the Letts have those weird, heavy eyebrows and the deep set eyes." So they got pictures of relatives as well that look like that. Um, so moving on with what happened. So once we made the connection, the women and myself, once we made the connection that we were all related, it took me a while to understand because my father had never mentioned that he had grandparents. By the time I was born, they were all dead. So he never talked about them. I knew my living grandparents very well. And as far as I knew, that's as far as it went. But they finally got through to me that my grandparents had parents and they were young like me at one time. Well, it was like, well, of course they would have been young. Why not? You know, it just took a while for it to soak in. And when it did, then it was like, oh my goodness. almost like a celebration. And people surrounded me that were either related to me or were friends of my dad. And I know that I met at least two of my dad's school teachers. And they told me that dad was a good student. And one, I found out years later, now they didn't tell me up in heaven, but I found out years later that when my dad was in high school, oh, the girls loved him because he looked like John Wayne.
Oh,
He looked like a young John Wayne. And oh boy, the girls were crazy about him, I guess. I can I've seen pictures of him when he was that age, and he does kind of resemble John Wayne. Um, but I also met, distant relatives that I didn't really know. Um, so we talked quite a bit, and quite a few people wanted to come up to me and tell me how they were related, and just share little stories and stuff with me. And I was pretty happy and comfortable, and I was just surrounded by all this love and appreciation. I was so accepted. It was, the way I was raised, the way I was treated when I was little. No, my family, they were kind of the kids need to be quiet and not noticed type families. If a kid acts up and makes a little bit of noise, they were told to be quiet. It's kind of an old-fashioned thing, I guess.
I remember that.
You too, yeah.
You didn't
Well,
interrupt adults.
yeah, you would never interrupt them.
Not like today. My grandkids, I can't get a word in. Speak to my kids because they're just yapping.
Yep, yeah. But I kind of like it when kids are forward enough that they want to tell you what they're thinking.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you silence them, you kind of hinder their growth, I think. Um, so yeah, what I suddenly realized was there was so much joy up there. I mean, I could even tell kind of as an example, I could say something that really wasn't all that funny, but they would laugh and loved it. They encouraged me, and oh, I was having a good time. Well, eventually, what happened was one of my great grandmothers came to me and said, "We need to talk to you because somebody special is coming for you, and we want you to go and go along with this. And don't be frightened; everything's fine." Because they always protected me. And I was having so much fun. I was like, "Fine, okay, whatever you all want, it's all right with me." And so another entity, and I remember seeing this other entity coming from a long distance away. It was like she had to travel, and it was a woman. She had to travel from a long distance, and they said, "See, here she's coming. You see?" And the person that showed up was an older-looking woman. Um, she was very plain looking, and everyone up there had clothing, but her clothing. See, my great grandparents, they looked like they were dressed in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Even their hairstyles were kind of that way. Well, this woman that shows up, she's wearing like a really loose tunic. And the cloth, the quality of it to me almost looked like, I don't know, potato sack, that really loose weave.
Hmm.
It almost looked itchy to me. And it just kind of hung on her. And her hair, I don't know why I noticed, but her hair was all chopped and weird patches sticking out. And I must have said something to her about it. And then the image of scissors came to me, and I don't remember if it was my great grandmother or if it was this other woman who brought this image of scissors to me. But um, I said, "Did you cut your hair with scissors, or you didn't do a very good job or something?" And this woman was really cool about it. And she said, "Well, when I lived on Earth, we didn't have scissors. I used a knife."
Reminds me of Joan of Arc.
Yeah. Or the Gnostics in from France. I understand some of them, they lived really stark, plain lives. Some of them even lived in caves. So I kind of wonder about that. But anyway, she never told me exactly who she was, except when she took me later, um, she introduced me to a man, and he was young, like in his late 20s, early 30s. And I asked her who this man was, and she told me that, well, this is my son. And she told me that on earth, they may have told you his name is Jesus.
She
Now,
said
he
that's
didn't,
her son.
her son. So it's possible I met Mother Mary,
Wow.
but she never came right out and told me that. And, but I do remember her telling me that this is my son. And on earth, also, she also said on earth, he goes by many names, but you may have been told his name is Jesus. So I think they knew a little bit about me and my family, my background. So before before all that introduction stuff happened, though, she took me away from my immediate family, and she told me that she said the family you're from, she said, has a very long history, and I would like to show you something about them. So the first thing that happened, she separated me from my great grandmother's great grandfathers. Um, it took me to a place that looked like a tunnel. She sort of just like waved her hand, and then like a tunnel opened up. It almost looked like a cave, and I could look way back in it, like it was a long, long cave or tunnel. And then closest to me, the opening of this cave, you could tell there were like levels. At each level, there were like a person or a couple of people that I was related to. And it went back multiple levels. I think each level represented a generation. So I think it must have gone back 10, maybe 15 generations. So much so, it went back so far that I think I got to see, I didn't get to talk to him or meet him, but I saw a man who was very tall, very slender. He had kind of a hunchback. He walked with a walking stick, not a cane, but a walking stick. So it was tall. Um, but he was wearing a form of pants. It looked like a form of pants. And this man, I understood to be like the originator of my family. And he was standing, observing, or he was standing very close to a very brilliant light. And he was just absorbing the love and the energy coming out of it. And he was very happy. So I got the strong impression that, well, the way we're connected to our families in heaven is that each new generation, as we are born and come into existence, the generations that have passed before us, it's like they elevate closer to the light of God, is the way it feels. It's like it's a path, and each new generation comes, occupies a lower place in heaven. And then when we die and we arrive, all those older generations before us get elevated up higher and higher.
Maybe like the fruits of our existence has, with the more good they do, is more
Mm-hmm,
appreciation for us and our
mm-hmm,
survival. And
mm-hmm.
just
And
wonder.
that family connection, I haven't heard a lot of people. Well, some people mention family, but I haven't heard anybody mention that they've met multiple generations like I did.
And to go back and then where he was absorbing that energy, you just, it makes you wonder. You know, that was the first one in your genealogy. Makes you wonder what was going on in that very beginning. That
Mm-hmm,
when generations started, when people started on Earth, you know, I just picture that, them absorbing that energy, that life force or God.
It It was like a life force energy. It was, because eventually that light came to me. And that's when I was introduced to Jesus. So the way I took it, well, actually, the way I put it together now in my mind, that light that that first generation of my family was absorbing came to me, and then it became the form of Jesus. So, yes, it was the life source. It was the light of God, and it was a concentration of love. In the spiritual form, we have no desire for food. We don't need oxygen. What we need is the life force, and we absorb it, is the way it feels to me, because I absorbed it. It filled me up. Um, and it was wonderful. I mean, I can't tell you how long I spent with Jesus alone, but um, I'm kind of I'm kind of going a little bit sideways with my storytelling. I used to have kind of a step-by-step method of telling you how this all happened, and I think I've skipped a little bit, but I need to back up and tell you that the female entity that initially took me to this cave, she felt like a mother. She treated me as a mother would treat a child. So since I don't know her name, I just call her mother. And then she told me that she introduced me to this man, and she told me, this is my son, and it was Jesus. So I'm pretty sure it was Mother Mary. But so when she pointed out this light at the end of the tunnel, and then she said, now see here, this light is coming. It wants to meet you. It's coming to greet you. So then this light was in front of me, and then it suddenly turned into a man, and that's when I got introduced to Jesus. And in my Christian background and everything that I've read, plus I've observed through churches and what they say these days, boy, they give you the impression that he was so powerful and so great and so pure that you should just fall on your face and beg for mercy, because we don't deserve anything. We're evil. We're sinners. Sorry, folks, that's not the way I was treated. And you can say at 8 years old that, well, I was just innocent. No, I wasn't. I was a bad little shit. I'm telling you, not, I was not that great of a kid. So, I mean, I was, but I also know I did some bad stuff.
Were you
So,
mean?
no, not so much mean. I was just like, I kind of resented. My parents kind of used kind of an overbearing authority type thing with me, and I fought that. So it's like, if I could sneak and do something and not get caught, I would do it on purpose just to get by with it, you know. So that kind of stuff. So anyway, so I met this Jesus fellow, and I have to tell you that he was nothing like at all like I'd heard in church. And this begging for mercy stuff, no, it was more like they were really glad to see me, and I was welcome. And I was like part of a family and appreciated. And just because I was who I was, I deserved the love. I didn't have to. I didn't have to work for it. It was handed to me.
Did Jesus look like what we typically think of Jesus?
No, no. You know, believe it or not, to me, he kind of acted a little bit dorky. But oh, super, super nice fellow, and very good with kids. I was comfortable with him just like I was with Mother. And at one point, he was talking with Mother, and I observed their relationship and how they acted with each other. And at one point, they were discussing what to do with me, what to do next. They discussed it openly. And if Mother had told Jesus, no, I don't like that idea, let's do something else, I think he would have gone along with it. That's the kind of relationship they had.
Respect.
Yeah, respect. Absolute respect for mother. Absolute. So as a result, if I'm like in a mixed company with a lot of people I don't know, I'm a lot more comfortable around women, especially older women, and I always have been, than I am with older men. Older men have expectations of manliness, and macho, and accomplishment, and competition, and all that stuff we do to each other down here on Earth. None of that exists up there. So, yeah, women aren't like that. And so I'm automatically a lot more comfortable with them. Um, so, mother told me to go with Jesus because he wanted to take me alone for a moment. And he told me that he didn't really tell me what he was going to do, but he was like, somehow I understood he was going to show me that light again.
Excuse me.
Um, Somehow I understood he was going to show me that light again. And when he did it, he was almost like we were playing, and it was almost like he was saying, no, watch this. You're going to think this is cool. And then he did. He just kind of like went, do you want to take a break?
Hey, Jim, can you get me a drink? Thank you.
That's a good chance for me to get some tea. I
Perfect
hate
timing.
that one. I get a dry spot in the back of my throat and I can't stop coughing
Yeah.
sometimes. It's horrible. Actually, I got a virus like 5 years ago. It did something to the back of my throat. It's real itchy now. Oh my goodness.
I
And
have asthma, so my throat stays dry.
oh, yeah, well, that'll do it. So so Jesus almost he was almost like, now watch this. It was kind of like we're playing and having fun. And he just whoom. And then he transformed from a human form to just absolute light. And that light radiated through me, and it was pure love. It was pure source of life. Oh man, it felt so good. I remember thinking to myself, I could just exist like this forever. It felt so good.
I saw Jesus once after my 5-year-old drowning at Sunday school.
Ah,
Had a spiritual experience and kind of out of body. But he looked just like I was coloring a picture of Jesus with the children. He was sitting on a
ah,
rock and two kids standing beside him on his lap. And I was suddenly there and it was real. I was
oh,
actually in this place and Jesus looked right at me with this just love on his face.
yeah.
And I was this spoiled little kid. Like I wanted to push that kid off his lap. I just stood there
Oh,
real still. I didn't do it, if I wanted to, because I wanted to get on his lap and feel that love so badly. Kind of like a kid waiting to sit on Santa Claus's lap,
oh,
my
sure,
turn, my
sure.
turn, my turn. I can't wait. And um, and then a voice said to me, Jesus loves children of every color. Never forget that. So it was an outside voice telling me this about Jesus as I'm watching him. Like, I don't know. I've just had this love for children ever since then.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I, and something about children, I can kind of get down on their level and play with them and stuff. And yeah, even at my age, I can get down on the floor with a little kid and I can like, you want to do this? You want to do that? Yeah, that'd be fun.
Yeah.
Play around with them a little bit.
My kids, they'll catch me having these conversations with their children, and they're like, and I'll hear them say, "Look how your mom is just talking like they're just like talking like an adult to me."
Yeah,
I just have no trouble getting right on their level and just having this
right.
conversation. I'm
Yeah,
like, well, yeah, why wouldn't I just? Don't you have these conversations? I'm sure they
yeah,
do. But we just get right into it.
yeah. But yeah, I don't know about you. I've I had a daughter, and I had to stop myself every so often because I found myself dictating to her what should be thinking, a little bit, and how she should be feeling.
And they clam up when
Uh,
we do that.
they do, and it didn't always work.
Uh-uh.
It's better just to talk with them and find out how they feel.
Hear them out, yeah.
So I'm spending this time with Jesus, and then I didn't really understand that. I didn't really look at it at that time like Jesus was God. It was just Jesus to me. But he took me to God. He took me to the Father. Um, I don't think he really introduced me. It was just like all of a sudden I was there with the big guy. It was like Jesus was still there, but he was kind of off to the side. And then I was there alone with the big G. And I remember a very deep rumbling voice.
Never forget that, do you?
No, never. It's like that voice, it almost rattled. It was so deep. The best way I can describe it is like standing on a top at a mountain range at the very highest peak. That voice could speak and it would travel 50 miles to the next mountain and it would be just as clear. That's the best way I can describe it. It just penetrates everything.
It's the ultimate authority.
Yes, ultimate authority. Well, we had a conversation, God and I remember him. I remember him asking me if I knew what Jesus had done for him, and I did know about dying on the cross, but then God almost scared me a little bit because he was like, Jesus made the ultimate sacrifice for me, and as a result, he gets. I'm using my own words, but the concept is there. As a result, here in heaven, he receives great rewards. I was told that he said, you are my son as well. You can accomplish things on earth and you can receive rewards too. What scared me was I was afraid he was asking me to be crucified.
Oh, at 8 years old, you probably did, yeah.
I was like, I don't know about this. You know, I remember feeling a little bit spooked, but the conversation went on. But later I understood him to say, no, you don't have to do that for me. But I do remember him saying, but I want you to never forget who I am and to never deny that you know me. So it's this part of the conversation is really vague and it's taking a while for it to come back to me. But I believe he told me, I'm going to send you back to earth. At that time, he said that. I'm going to send you back to earth. Then I was told, never forget who I am. Never forget that I'm your father. Never forget that you are my child. Um, so after that, the conversation, it just ends. And I remember being back with Jesus, and then mother was there again. And that's when my life review took place. Um, and to me, it was almost like mother and I don't remember Jesus being around for that part at all. I think he sort of moved on and did something else. So it was just me and mother. It was almost like we were in a little room, but yet, of course, there was no furniture. Although it felt like there was kind of like a elevated area in front of us. And then up there was like this screen, almost like a movie screen. And I saw events of my life taking place. My short 8 years,
That's
just
what
think,
fascinates me most about NDEs, because I experienced the movie screens too.
mm,
And that fascinates me how
yeah,
that happens.
yeah. My understanding of it as a child was it was like a movie. That's the concept I have of it. But I know that I witnessed my own birth, and at that time, I saw it was like my birth wasn't so comfortable. And the thing that stuck with me was that the doctor was really old. Turns out he retired like a year or two later after I was born. Uh, I wouldn't breathe. And he spanked me or swatted me really hard, but he wouldn't give up. He kept swatting me. And eventually, Eventually I cried. But I guess maybe now would be a good time to tell you what I remember about my birth now,
Okay.
because the blanks were filled in by my mother. Um, I almost died when I was born. I was with my mother she was on her deathbed, and she was telling me all kinds of things about her life that she regretted. And she finally told me this long story about my birth and how it wasn't so good. I always had memories of my birth, but it was like, it was almost like a dream. The events that I remembered didn't really fit until mom spoke up and told me that I was born in 1955. My county, they didn't even have a hospital back then. I was born in a house. They called it the hospital. And mom told me that they used laughing gas in those days to help women with the pain. But the old doctor, he was an avid hunter, and he knew that my dad liked to hunt. And he really wanted to take a cigarette break and go talk to my dad in the next room. So he put the mask with the laughing gas on next to my mother's face and told her just to turn into the gas, breathe in when it hurts, and I'm going to be gone for a while. And then she was supposed to turn away, I guess, when she had enough. But apparently she got a good whiff and it knocked her out. And when the doctor came back into the room, she was passed out and the mask was on her face. What I recall my birth to the point of I recall being an infant inside my mother, being pushed out. The natural contraction of her muscles were pushing me, and I was cooperating with it. But that natural birth process stalled. Um, and then my host, or I remember hearing a heartbeat that started slowing down. It wasn't my heartbeat, it was mom's. Her heartbeat started slowing down to a point that it almost stopped. And I was being squeezed as an infant inside my mother. I was being squeezed so hard that I felt like I was going to die. And I started trying to back up. And I left my infant body and I became a sphere or a ball of light. And then what came next was another sphere of light came to me. And we started flying around in this place that was full of colors. It was almost like we were in a field where we were like insects, and we're hopping from flower to flower. But this other sphere of light that came to me was like older than me, and I knew it. And I also knew that it was a girl, and she was taking care of me. And so I went with her. So I left my body as an infant. I almost died. I think my mother almost died.
That's interesting for people that's had miscarriages to kind of see what their child went through.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I hope that my story encourages people to know that infants are cared for. Even little babies, if they pass away in utero, is that the way you say it? In utero? I'm sorry, I can't. Some
Utero.
words I can't pronounce too well.
Utero, I think.
Utero. Um, Even little babies, they're taken care of. To me, that's what happened. So, long story short, my mother's on her deathbed. She's explaining to me all these things in her life that she regretted. She told me about a miscarriage that she had, and it was a girl. Well, all of a sudden, all those memories I had of this other entity, and I was believing it was a girl, I just suddenly dawned on me, I must have met my sister. That's who came to me when I left my body as
I've
an
got
infant.
chills.
Yeah. So I was telling my mom, that maybe I got to meet the baby that you lost, and it was my sister. My mom, of course, nah, no, that never happened. See, when it came to spiritual things, mom relied very heavily on her Christian background. And if it wasn't fully explained in detail from the Bible or in her church, nope, you can't
Yeah.
trust it. You can't believe
Right.
in it.
I understand. And a lot of stuff you
So,
can't trust, so you do have to be careful.
well, yeah, I suppose. And I've met a few of them too.
I'm talking about the new age stuff that's going on.
Yeah. So anyway, so I put two and two together when my mother was passing away, and so not only did I have my mother's death to deal with, I also had the connection of all these other things that I remembered all of a sudden coming together for me. It was like, wow, it was a big awakening all at once. So, beyond that one segment of my short 8 years on Earth, Mother in Heaven also showed me, I was around family an awful lot, especially my mother's family, because she came from a family of 11 kids and she was one of the oldest. So I was an infant, and she had brothers and sisters who were in grade school, and they would come over to our house and they'd play with me. And I was very well cared for, and a very loving family, good people. And there was a segment where I got to see that I was a toddler, and I got to play with my grandfather, my mother's father. He played a game with me at the kitchen table, and he pretended he was going to take my fingers and he was going to munch on them, and I'd squeal and pull away, and that kind of stuff. And I remember Mother in Heaven really liked that segment too. She was like, she didn't say anything about it, but it was like her. What I got from her was that what I experienced that day was true love, and the playfulness that families engage in together. It's really important stuff. It's valuable. Um, so when we get too tied down with all of our worries and our work and our labors, and we tend to not play with our kids, we shouldn't do that. We should include them as much as we can. I tried to. I played with my daughter a lot. And
It's not
even,
something I think we didn't grow up with. At least speaking for myself, I didn't grow up
yeah,
with our parents playing with us. I remember playing softball a few times, but it's
mhm,
not something we did. That's not kids and adults didn't. I mean, we were separated.
yeah,
Don't talk thing. Don't speak unless you're spoken to, and don't interrupt adults. And so when I had my kids, it's like, gosh, I'm not sure I know how to sit down and play with them because nobody did it with me as a child.
oh, yeah. It's kind of a learned thing, perhaps. But well, because I observed it in heaven with my grandfather, see, he loved kids. Um, so when my daughter, I was feeding her and she was in her high chair, I did the munching on the fingers thing with her. Oh boy, did she love it. Squealed and laughed just like I did too.
Isn't that wonderful when you can
Yeah,
repeat the things your grandparents did?
yeah.
It's an awesome feeling.
Well, and then that side of my family too, my mom's side of the family, um, they were real animated people. They made each other laugh. And I don't know, just to be around them, it was just a real joyful experience. And Grandma Bess, she was kind of a heavy set woman. So I remember as a kid, if we could get her to laugh a little bit, she would kind of heave a little bit and her big bosoms would bounce. And we got a kick out of that. You know. And playful things like I remember Thanksgiving, we always had Mogan David wine. But grandma, there was a thing in our family. Grandma would have like one little glass and that was it. Um, Apparently, a relative at one point drank so much of this stuff they weren't talking right, and they said, no more wine. It makes me neak in the wheeze.
Oh,
And that meant weak in the knees. They switched it around. So Grandma Bess, she would say, "No more wine. It'll make me neak in the wheeze." So okay, Grandma. But we had some great times together, all of us. Just really enjoyable. As a matter of fact, I did a session like this with someone who's a psychic, and she told me that there was a woman there with me. She said, and she kept asking me, does the number 66 mean anything? I had to really think about it. My grandma Bess died at 66. And at, at the time when I was doing that session, I was still 66. So, wow, it was amazing to me that my grandma had come through for that psychic. I thought that was pretty cool. And as it turns out, she's around me quite a bit. I've noticed her. I still bake her bread. She has a recipe. She had a recipe for rye bread, Danish rye bread. I still make it. And when I'm kneading that bread, I'm thinking about her. I'm thinking about when I was a little kid and she babysat me. I remember watching her make that bread. So I think about her, and I think we can kind of connect with people in heaven that way when we remember fond things, happy times. We make that connection and we recall like happy, good things. I think it gets through.
I do too.
It gets wrapped in our love, I think. And I think it gets through. And I wonder if maybe we don't glorify them a little bit when we do that, you
Yeah,
know?
I think so too.
So, but on the other hand, if we think about really bad, ugly times, what about that? Does that get through? I don't know.
Yeah, they might be
I
like,
can't tell
oops,
you
I guess
that.
I messed up there. I guess I should have did better.
Well, yeah, but I don't know, hell and punishment and all that. I didn't experience any of it at all. And I know that I was a bad kid from time to time. So I'm not so sure that the religions and the Bible and all that, I'm not so sure we understand exactly how that all works. Not yet.
You don't think you were in hell in the beginning with the people, the kids calling at you or whatever, torturing you?
Well, well, I was, but you know what? I think in a way I invited them because I entertained fear. Had I been like the older spirits that I saw going up, they were obviously ready to die. They'd been sick. And when they separated from their bodies, they were joyful. And I also had a sense of them being very religious. So as soon as they separated, they immediately started going up and they were happy.
How did
Happy
your
to,
experience end? How'd you go from talking to God to, was you just back or?
um, well, after my review and everything, um, I was eventually taken back to my family that first introduced me to heaven.
Okay. Back where you
And
started.
yeah, and one more little piece I'd like to add, if you don't mind, is this chair that I've got here, this high back chair.
That's an interesting chair.
Yeah. Well, my when I met my great grandfather Let, he was sitting in a chair. I met my great grandmother Let first, and then she told me that my great grandfather was there, and she introduced me to him, and he was sitting in a chair just like this, and he was surrounded like green grass, and beautiful flowers. And then he got up and came over and talked to me. Eventually, he asked me if I wanted to sit in his chair, and I did. But I didn't think anything of it. But what I got out of it, what I understood was I was also shown a chair that was there for me, but it looked more modern. It didn't have a high back. And I do remember asking about what is the significance of these chairs. And I was told that it's a place of honor. It's like a gift and it's for you. It's a place where you can rest and you can relax. Um, that's what I got out of it. So when I was in Facebook several years ago and I saw this chair for sale. I think it used to sit in a Catholic church, but I was not raised Catholic. Um, I saw it for sale and I was just like, yeah, what the heck? I bid for it and I was surprised I got it. So now I'm really proud of it,
Yeah, it's nice.
you know. So I'm sitting at the end of our dining table. So
I love the
everybody that
flower
I,
with the three leaves is cut out.
oh yeah, this, I'm not sure, but I think that means Father, Son, Holy Ghost.
Makes
I'm
sense.
not real sure though. See, I'm not, like I say, I'm not Catholic. Actually, we were Lutherans, so we were kind of taught to not really like the Catholics that much.
Oh, yeah, I understand that. My grandma was very upset when I married a Catholic.
Oh yeah. Well, the thing that, well, see, my grandma on my mother's side, the heavyset woman, I do remember her talking one time about Catholics. She'd been to a funeral, and when she got home, she was talking like, honestly, I don't understand those people. And she goes, "What's with all that smoke and all that stuff they're flipping around? It stinks.
Incense.
How does that please God?" And she'd say stuff like that. And I have to, in a way, I have to kind of like, we got a lot of traditions and things that we do through our churches here on earth. But, if we really stop and think for a minute, as a near-death person, how does all that please God? It pleases us on earth because we think we're honoring somebody. I don't think it really gets through to God so much, other than maybe what's in our hearts. And we're thinking, okay, God, we're burning this incense to honor you. Maybe that's getting through. But the incense itself, I think it's
After
meaningless.
being married to a Catholic for 16 years and after we were divorced, I thought, well, I'll go back to Christian church, because like Catholic, I felt was like my husband's church. I should stay away. So I had a real hard problem with being in church. And this one church, they were just had this basket of the communion and they were just passing it down each row and then down each row, and I thought, that's the communion. Like they wasn't like honoring it as sacred by just passing it in this basket. It just felt wrong. Because at Catholic church I'm used to, you walk up and the priest is holding the communion and he puts it in your mouth and you do the
Mm,
sign of the cross and then you go on and then you kneel. And so it was this thing, but just to pass it in the basket, it just was a very, it felt disrespectful. It's just what you get used to.
yeah, yeah. On the other hand, I'll tell you that what I detect sometimes from the Catholics is, boy, they're pretty righteous, or they think they are.
And so are Christians.
Well,
I was sitting,
yes,
I was sitting in the Christian churches after this,
truth.
being Catholic for a while, and they would just start talking how the Catholics were going to hell and they were serpents and all this stuff. And one
No,
day I got my 9 adopted kids and I said, "Come on," and we walked out in the middle of church. So it was a big scene for me and 9 kids trailing me, right? But and we never went back because I didn't, I would have been offended too if I was in a Catholic church and they were saying Christians was going to hell because I was
well,
Christian,
sure.
till I was 18. So, and and just to say those things, which I don't want to hear on either side.
Right. And so I don't get labeled somebody who's anti-Christian. I need to tell you though that some of the most pure, beautiful, spiritual people I've met in my life have been Christians. In particular, there were two that were Catholic. I know, or at least what I sense, is that all that protocol and the rules and the all that stuff that churches adopt over the centuries and traditions, all that really is meaningless. The fancy buildings and all that. God is interested in us as individuals and what we're thinking and feeling inside our hearts. That's how we connect with
Yeah,
heaven.
but I appreciate even Sunday school and the times of
Yeah.
the church
Mm-hmm.
growing up, and even being in the Catholic Church, because all of those experiences made me closer to God. It
Mm-hmm.
made me take time out, and you go to this, and you try to know right from wrong. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't just out here living like who cares what I do.
Oh yeah,
As the times I
it,
wasn't going to church, I did start
mhm.
feeling like that. Well, who cares? What's it matter?
Yeah, there's some structure there and it's guidance. And I think humanity overall, we do the best we can. But when I criticize churches and stuff, I'm talking as an adult. I can discern for myself what I think is important and what's not. And if I'm wrong, I'm terribly sorry. And I don't want to tell people to go away from your church. If you're comfortable there and you feel loved and it's good for you, then fine. Nobody's being hurt, I don't think. But I did meet a woman once. I had a roommate that was I didn't really know him too well. We were the same age and we're sharing an apartment. And he invited me to come home with him for a weekend and meet his parents. His mother was a very devout Catholic. And I have to tell you, growing up, my family they never really dissed the Catholic Church too much, but they didn't really trust them. Um, but I was okay. They were very nice people. But what happened during the night was the whole family was there. It was a birthday party, and it was another very large family. One of the babies of one of the couples that were there got sick overnight. And my roommate's mother, the older woman, she took that baby downstairs, had it in a rocking chair, and she was from a Polish family. She was singing old Polish songs, and she was rocking that baby. And what happened was it couldn't breathe. I was just in the next room, sleeping on a couch, but I saw the whole thing. And this woman just kept rocking this baby and trying to comfort it, and nothing was working. And it's obvious the baby was struggling, couldn't breathe. And we were isolated way out in the country on a farm. So the mother took the baby into the bathroom for a while and came back, and she was smearing this goop on the baby's neck. Within like a half an hour later, the baby was fine and it was sleeping soundly. And since it was quiet again and the baby was no longer struggling, I fell asleep and slept really hard. When I woke up in the morning, the baby was still sleeping in that grandmother's lap. That grandmother was still sitting there praying, and she glowed blue. She sat there and she was looking up out the kitchen window, and there was a light outside the window, and it filtered through and it just glowed all around her. It was a very beautiful experience. So she was very devout. And I think all those hours that I was sleeping, that grandmother was praising God that whole time.
It makes me think of the genealogy when you went way back and the man was absorbing energy.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me think of that.
Yeah. So it was, to me, it was almost felt like there was an angel outside that window shining love down on that old woman. And the next morning, everybody was asking her, well, how did you get the baby better? And she said, we had this stuff in medicine that we were using on our goats. We got it from the vet, and the goats were sick. They had something wrong in their throats, and we were told to smear it on their throats. And she said, I didn't know what it was. I didn't know it worked, but I smeared it on the baby and it worked. So the baby must have had some sickness that made it choke and couldn't breathe. And the medicine worked. Amazing.
It's a good thing she thought of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because otherwise, I'm not sure that baby sounded bad enough. I'm not so sure it would have made it that night. It kind of scared me at first when I heard it crying.
So your near
So,
death experience, I'm curious, when you come back, like what did you have this full memory of everything? Or did it come
uh,
back later in life?
well, I always knew that I died. I was told they're gonna. I was told I had to choose. Do you want to go back to Earth, or do you want to stay up here with us? I couldn't make up my mind. Eventually, Mother came to me and said, your mother on Earth is praying and she wants you back. And if you don't come back, she's going to be very sad. So I decided then, I was like, oh, I don't want my mother to be sad, so I better go back. So I made the decision. Then there was a lot of conversations back and forth. My great grandparents, well, one great grandmother didn't want me to go. But I was like asking questions like, will I be a father? And I was told yes. I was even shown a picture of myself as an older guy, and I look like that guy right now. And they told me I would write a book, and I did. It's not a very good book, I don't think, but
How old were you when you wrote it?
uh, 5 years ago,
Oh, okay.
or well, no, 2015. Well, about 7 years. 2015 is when I went public, and I started with Endorf, if you're familiar with
Yes.
them.
That's where I
Um,
started too.
yeah, yeah, they're not as tight knit of a community. I met more people through IONS, um, but they told me I would write a book, and I do remember specifically. Mother told me, when you go back to Earth, tell people about us, tell people about this place, so they can understand like you do. But when there's like a veil or something that comes over you once you're back on Earth, you don't remember everything, and I didn't. And so I remember entering my body. My body was in the bed in the hospital room. And I remember floating down to it. And I entered through the back of my head, feet first. I slipped back into my body. And then as soon as I did, I felt the sickness was still there. And it felt horrible. And my living grandmother on earth was holding my hand, and she was kind of petting my hand. And I opened my eyes and I said, Grandma, I went to heaven. I met your mother. She's really nice.
Hmm.
Well, my grandma Let, my living grandmother, that side of the family, they weren't very into church and spirituality at all. It kind of scared my grandma. She kind of backed up and was like, "Oh," she didn't know what to think of it. And then all the adults in the room, "Oh, you were just having a dream. You were really sick. It was just a dream." And then they're all agreeing with each other. Yeah, he just had a dream, didn't he? Yeah, they're all agreeing with
Got
each
big
other.
excited.
And I'm laying there in bed going, "No, you got it wrong. I was in heaven." But they wouldn't listen to me. And isn't that the way it goes? Here on earth, a lot of people just do not believe. Excuse me. So eventually it took 2 operations to correct the problem. My appendix had burst the day that I crawled back to the couch. So all that gunk that was inside me, the infection, it was pretty serious. So it took 2 operations, and I had to endure the ether for the second operation. Like a month later, it was horrible. And then eventually I went back to school. I do remember in grade school, I was in the third grade. I do remember talking about going to heaven. And I remember a kid in school, I think her name was Diane. She was like, they don't talk about that in my church, so I don't believe him. From then on, the teacher would not let me talk about it. I wasn't allowed to. And actually, I didn't want to because I didn't want people upset.
Mm-hmm.
No. But I forgot a lot of what happened. I forgot a lot of it. I always knew that I died and went to heaven, but the details weren't there. And then when I was in my early 20s, I was really, really tired. Been working all day, and I was extremely tired from work. I went into an very hard sleep. And I had a dream that I was in my hometown church, and I woke up and God was there. And he was up at the altar, and I heard a bubbling stream. I saw grass. I heard birds. It was beautiful. The air was very clean, and God was up there. And I was in one of the back pews, close to the door, and I'm like peeking up from behind the pew. And that's when I realized that I was naked, and I was like immediately self-conscious. And then God called out to me, and he said, "Kenneth, Peter, Leth, will you approach me?" And I'm like, Do I have to? I don't think I'm ready. No, I'm naked. Nah, I don't want to. Like that, the dream was over. But that opened my eyes again. And then from then on, I remembered a lot of detail about my near death came back to me, and everything just started coming back. So I went back to school. I went back to a community college, and I took some creative writing classes because I wanted to write it all down. And I realized that my high school education wasn't good enough to really communicate well. So I went back to school, and as soon as I got some learning under me, through me, I started writing it down. Unfortunately, the very first version of what I wrote, it's all gone. I gave a copy of it to my mother, and it got lost. And I did it on a computer, and computers have changed so much over the years. It just got lost, you
Yeah.
know. But I did write it again right around 2014, 2015, and it was pretty good. But I've added to it since as well. So, and I just keep adding stuff.
Do things still come back to you, or was it just there from the beginning and you just kept quiet?
Yeah, things are coming back to me. Um, like I know that I lived another life before this one, and that was one of those times when it just came back to me. Um, it's funny, like sometimes something will come to me, and I'll ask myself, "Now, did I see that in a dream?" No, no, it's a memory. It's a memory, and I know the difference.
Yeah.
Um, and so I remember my previous life. Long story short, I died probably a young man. I know there were kids around. I know there were a couple of women. I think one of them was my mother. So I think I might have been married. And I lived in northern France. And I remember harvesting reeds like close to a river. And those reeds were used like as a building material, like a thatched roof. So we lived in a hut. I remember a lot of dirt. I slept on the floor on straw. I remember that. And then I remember getting sick and then leaving my body. And I remember the women were in and out of the hut, not knowing what to do, very upset. And eventually they decided to leave me and they just left me to die alone in that house. And I remember floating up like into the rafters. And then eventually I was through that. And then I was above the roof, looking down on the thatched roof. And then I went up and there was a light. The very next thing I remember is I was sitting there with like a council of elders, very powerful entities. And the one question they asked me that I faltered on was they wanted to know how well did I understand love and the importance of love. And apparently I didn't answer them very well. And I had like a guide that was with me, like a personal guide, um, like an angel. And he was there to coach me, to help me understand. And I remember him saying, answer their questions the best you can and just be honest. That's all you can do. Apparently, it was decided I didn't understand love well enough and I needed to come back for more learning to Earth. So then I was removed from the council, and my angel friend, my guide, was with me. And he opened up a vision down on Earth. And he showed me a young couple that were very much in love down in Earth, on Earth. And they were like in somebody's living room, but the house was older. And it turns out it was my mother's parents' house. And it was my mom and dad that I saw. It must have been a holiday like Thanksgiving, maybe Christmas. And they were very much in love, and I could tell. And I could feel the love between them. And I remember enjoying it very much. So this guide, this angel that was with me told me, um, you can be their child. You can be with them and you can experience more love through them. Are you willing to go? And I said, yes. So next thing I know, I'm inside my mother And then you know the rest of the story. I'm being born and I almost died.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So
What's the name
now,
of your book?
um, a child goes to heaven.
Okay. Is that Amazon?
You can find it in Amazon. If you type the title, A Child Goes to Heaven, it'll pop up either Amazon or my publisher, which is michelebooks.com. But I'm not going to spell it because if you just do it in the browser, it'll pop up.
Okay.
You can see it.
Is there a way for people to contact you if um, somebody wants to have you on their show, or
Um, well,
do you have a
um,
website?
I don't have a web presence. I am in Twitter.
Okay.
So I'm in Twitter. I am the at symbol Ken and then the underscore and then Leth, Leth.
Okay.
I'm in Twitter. Or my email, if you want to contact me directly for like an interview, that is ken.let, and it's spelled Leth at yahoo.com.
Okay.
So
Is
you
there
can
anything
contact me that
else
way.
that you'd like to add that we didn't get to discuss, or?
Well, no, not, I don't have a need to discuss anything, but if you have any questions, feel free. No,
Yeah, you're pretty detailed.
yeah, I go into a lot of detail. I
I
will
like
tell you
that.
though, oh, thank you. I will tell you though that one time I was talking to a near-death person and she asked me, so what did heaven smell like to you? I was like,
Smell.
what? Smell? I didn't smell anything. But apparently some people have.
Mm.
I think it's related to like visions of flowers and fields. So smells and then beautiful sounds would essentially go with that too. So I've learned at first I was kind of skeptical when I heard other people describe heaven because I had my experience and that was good enough for me. And I thought other people's were, I'm not so sure about yours. I like mine.
Right.
I've learned over the years to not be critical of other people, what they say about heaven. That's not wise to criticize other people and their experience. Um, it's because who am I, really? You
Right.
know,
And I've had two NDs, and they were so different. One
were
was
they?
it was out of body, and the other one was the whole tunnel in the light,
Yeah.
and God and Jesus, this panel of people, and similar to you in a way in the light where you can kind of see them and feel like you're in this room, and then Jesus brought me into the future because I asked if my sons would be better off without me. For whatever reason, I agreed to stay. If not, I begged to return. And so he
Mm,
took me down in the future, and we saw my sons. And one son was just very, very angry and crying that he wanted
oh,
his mom back. And then, went through this whole thing back in the white light. And then I cried out to Jesus because at first it was this panel of people and faint outline, God sitting up front and center, and then when we come back, I realized Jesus was sitting beside God, which would be my right, which the Bible says he sits on God's right, right? But it was my right, so being God's left. What sense that makes, I don't know, but that's what I remember. And
hmm.
I was crying out to Jesus, and I said, "Who else will teach them about you?" And then I'm back in the wheelchair.
Wow.
I was 25, My first one was 5 years old of drowning. It was out of body. I was just a ghost kid running
Uh,
around doing stuff. So,
sure. And I've read that some people, when they initially die, they do kind of stay on Earth and walk around like a ghost for a while.
yeah, I did with the first one. The second one, I was just shot like a rocket and I was straight there right now.
Yeah. No, I left my body on the playground a year before my near death. I fell and I don't know if I got knocked out of my body or if I chose to jump out. I don't know. But all I know is I could see my body on the playground and I was hovering over it. So I don't know. I kind of wonder if maybe almost dying when I was born,
Yeah, I think so.
if we're not kind of opened up.
Right. I believe that.
Yeah.
Because I've had people say, like you, who remembers their birth. And I've had people say, now, how could somebody remember? Like she was referring to a guy that says he remembered being the incubator when he was born. And she says,
Hmm.
how could somebody remember that? Says, their brain's not even formed yet. Da, da, da. And I said, because these memories are in our soul. They're not in our
Yeah.
brain. And in our soul, everything's perfect. You don't need the age
Mhm.
of a brain, to be wise and have this good memory bank.
Yeah.
No, you're in that realm and everything is perfect. And I feel like they're just preserved
Mhm.
in that realm. Everything's preserved, you know. And for these memories to show up in these movie screens while we're in heaven, I find so fascinating because it
Mhm.
seems like our memories are being stored and going to be
Mhm.
used when we pass on.
Mhm. Right on. And I also feel like near-death people, at least in my case, I feel like a part of me is always open. Like if I really think about it, uh, God is there. Sorry, I knocked my microphone out, my earphone. There, now I can hear you again. So, yeah, a part of me is, oh, I feel like I'm always open. Like I can stop what I'm doing at any point in my life, driving a car for that matter, and I can think about God and say, God, are you listening? I know He's there. But I think the trick is to uh, recognize appreciation and gratitude and love and wrap your thoughts in all that, and that gets through.
Mm-hmm.
I think in also, I think in moments of like anger, I think we might be closing that channel of
Yeah.
communication. Is when the human emotion completely takes over and it's pure animal instinct. I'm not so sure that we're connected anymore. It doesn't feel like it to me anyway.
Yeah. I said the other day, I feel like sometimes I have to take off my horns to find my halo again. When I start getting
Yeah,
angry and upset about things, like, oh, look what you're doing. Take off those horns. And, I have to listen to Christian music or pray or something to get back that goodness that I like to walk
yeah,
around feeling.
yeah. So, are you a bit of an empath as well?
Yeah.
Me too. You know what really trips me up is if I'm around a group of angry men. Oh man. And if I have, see, I had to deal with that sometimes at work. Oh, it's like I can't hear anymore. My ears start to shut down. And it's almost like I enter into a phase of confusion where words are being said, but that anger interferes and it muddles the
It
message.
does.
I can't, sometimes my ears will just start ringing. I can't understand what people are saying. I have to get away from that.
Yeah. I anymore, I block. I mean, I'm sorry, I have to. I block people. I'll block
Hmm.
people from the channel, or Facebook, or stay away from certain things because I take on that energy. Being an empath, like being around
Hmm.
my mother, she's so negative and mean. It was just draining me, like for days. And I felt like I was carrying her around with me.
Oh,
And I just have to protect myself anymore because I just can't carry it on.
one thing I've really struggled with, and my wife can hear me talking, but I'm going to say it anyway. um, on her deathbed, my mother many times told me stories of things that I'd never heard before, constantly asking me to forgive her as if she needed to be forgiven. She had a real guilt complex. I never felt like she needed forgiveness. She did what she did. She did the best she could. And for me to hold a grudge would be wrong. Forgiveness is divine. And especially somebody that's on their bed dying, I'm not going to hold them guilty and like they need to be punished. It's not my place. So I forgave her. But she's been gone since 2012. Every so often, something really negative that she said or did that angered me at the time, it'll pop into my head. And so I work through it. And then I have to stop myself and go, wait a minute, I forgave her. For me to remind myself of this negative memory is wrong. I don't need to go through this. And actually, it's not going to resolve anything. I need to let it go. I really have to work at that sometimes. And I think what I end up telling myself eventually is my cause or my goal here is to move on and be better than that. Okay, so maybe it was a learning experience for me. And it was an example of something that I don't want to engage in myself. So I need to be better than that.
Hmm.
I'm not going to be like that. Please, let's do better. And to tell myself I need to work harder. And I know that my mother never ever purposely hurt me. Not, I don't think she ever believed that she was. So those are internal things with me. Only I know those hurts, I think. And darn it, she asked forgiveness and I gave it to her. That's it. End of story. No more.
That's good. That's good advice.
Yeah.
Because we're just hurting ourselves.
Right, right. To keep running that through my head is just it's like negative thoughts. And that negative energy is going to go somewhere. It might affect something else negative that I don't realize. And I just don't want to be responsible for that.
Yeah, I kind of think of it as a record player. Like we jump on those bad memories where we, had trouble forgiving something, and it just spins and spins and spins. It's like eventually we gotta just get off of there, and
Yeah,
and get on something else because it'll just keep going. It seems like it just keeps turning and turning until you get rid of it.
yeah, yeah. So I don't know that I have anything else that,
Okay.
you
All
know,
right. Well, I
that I would share.
appreciate you coming on, and it's very interesting.
Well, thank you.
And so,
I love hearing yours too. Actually, you and I could just sit and talk for hours. You know, forget that it's on camera.
yeah, because yours 8 years old. My first one was at 5 years old, and then so much of your NDE. I mean, yours is way, way more in detail and longer. But there's some things that I can picture that because it was so similar to things I experienced. But I just did want to ask something. Maybe I shouldn't. Since you have heaven, Jesus, angels experience, did you have any trouble or feel any bias in the NDE community because you have a Christian tone to your experience?
Um, I've met people who were agnostic, um, didn't believe in Christianity at all until they had a near death, but they have a very spiritual bend to it and not Christian. Um, you know what? I'm not so sure that. Now, remember the entity I called Mother, when she introduced me to her son, she said, "You may have heard his name was Jesus." That's the most Christian thing that happened to me up there. None of the other stuff was like that, except for the existence of God. But I don't, I did not feel at all like belonging to a church was a necessary thing. It felt to me like what was in my heart and how I worked or dealt with other people was the all important thing. And to be loving and caring and nice to people. Although doing all that, you can fake it too, and still be mean inside your heart. So I don't know. The bias, uh, yeah, I did a little bit. I met some people who were so into their Christianity that I was telling my story openly in open company with some other near-death people, and I didn't feel like the ones that were very heavy on the Christian side. I didn't really feel like they really took me serious until I mentioned that the angel had a sword. Um, I asked him about the sword and why did he have it, and he told me that eventually he would be told to get out his sword and he was going to cut through the darkness. It was sort of a good and evil thing, and there would be like a battle, and that God would ask him to get out his sword and fight. That they would drive the darkness away. When I mentioned that part, the ultra Christian people clapping and hallelujah, hallelujah, praise God, and got into all that, and it kind of caught me off guard because yeah, okay, it's a heavy Christian thing. Yeah, you can find reference to stuff like that in the Bible. And you know what? I can read the Bible and through the eyes of a near-death person, I can kind of see a little more to those stories than maybe what some Christians get. I think there's a little more in depth, a little more meaning. If you've been through near death, some of it just seems to make more sense.
It's strange how we get discrimination from both ends, the atheist and the New Age end, and the extreme Christian end, which I think I'm an extreme Christian, but I'm not. There's a difference. I try to stay open minded, but it seems like there's discrimination on both ends. That one to say, well, that's not biblical. That's like I have some of my Christian friends getting mad at some of the guests I have because
Mm,
something they said, well, that's against the Bible, and like you're going to go to hell for having this guest on. And then I have other people, well, that's too Christian. I'm out of here. I'm not listening to your podcast because it's too Christian. And I feel like I want to invite everybody on, and I just want to hear their story, and I want them to feel open to express their truth, their what really happened, and I don't want them to feel like I have to be, I have to pretend to be Christian on the show, or I have to pretend to be New Age on the show. And some people ask me beforehand, well, about my audience, so they know how to gear their talk, and I'm like, well, I don't want that. I want you to just say what you experienced, because I feel that's the only way we're going to get to the
mm,
truth of what the other side is really like, if we all
mm.
can express the truth.
Well, I can sense and feel spiritual lightness inside churches sometimes, but it's because I'm getting it from other people, not from the minister or the church itself. Boy, I've seen some people that walk into a church and they're just like amazed. Look at this building, it's so beautiful. Look at all the windows. And, oh, it's so pretty. That's not Christianity, and that's not praise to God. It's just a structure that humanity put up.
When I tried going back to churches, after I left the Catholic Church, and I even went back to the Catholic Church because I said, well, Christians aren't never going to accept me again because I've been Catholic, and so they don't trust me, right? And
Mm,
so I go back to the Catholic. Well, they don't trust me because I've been going to the Christian church, and so I just said heck with it. And so I say it sounds egotistical now, but I say I am church because what I fill myself with, and my communication with God, or doing my podcast, or trying to find the truth and trying to
mhm.
do things I do, to me that's my church. Even before I had a podcast, you know, and you can carry church with you and you create your own church in your heart. I think it's
Mhm.
just my way of thinking.
That's right. God is interested in us as individuals. We are a part of him, so he wants to know how we're doing. And he wants to know how pure we are. He wants to know what's going on in our hearts. It's like a vault. And so we carry all that with us when we die. It goes with us, like you say, it's part of our spirit.
And when I used to go to church regular, people would say, "Oh, why do you go to church? There's no need going to church." And I said, "Well, I need to, because at that point in my life, I needed to. I
Yeah,
needed that structure. I needed that discipline. I needed to get back where I used to be." And so that helped me during that time.
yeah.
But then when I started feeling not accepted anywhere, I just like, well, you know what? I'm more of a introvert,
Mhm,
and then people around, like being an empath, and you're picking up everybody's energies, and
mhm.
it only take one dirty look, and somebody say, well, "Why are you here?" Or "You should be going
Oh,
to a
yeah.
different church," or something to just totally make me just like want to stay the heck away from there.
The worst thing that happened to me regarding Christians, people that were really into their church, I had an incident in my adult life when I was attacked by, I believe it was a demon. I'm pretty sure it was in my sleep. And I, um, I fought it off, but I couldn't do it alone. I had to ask God for help, and the help came. But I was young enough that I wanted to talk about it. And I happened to mention it to a couple women that were very into their church. They're also very Catholic. Um, their response was, stuff like that doesn't happen to people who go to church.
Yeah.
And then they said, you need to go to church right away and beg forgiveness. You need to change your life because you attracted that thing. Sorry, folks, but I did not attract it. It saw me and it attacked me because it thought it could.
Sometimes I have come to believe here lately that the better or the more good we do, the more those spirits can try to mess us up.
They try to attack us. Yeah.
Yeah, like there's always this foot out there trying to trip me up when I just start doing something really good. And I'm like, wow, I'm really doing good. Look here, I'm doing really doing good. And then bam, this dark energy just starts coming in. And it's like, why does this always happen? And then I've come to realize you got to have faith through that.
Yeah. Your faith. And I rely very heavily on that open channel, because when I start feeling a little bit threatened, like, or start thinking that something nefarious is going on here, I just start opening up that channel and I start talking to God, and I just say, okay, God, I can't do this alone. And I keep reminding myself that God is where the power is, not through me. And I almost always get through it just fine. Um, but then I don't, you have to understand where I'm living now. Part of the reason I love living in isolation so much is because there's not a lot of population. And because of that, I don't think there's a lot of spirit stuff going on around here. I've seen a few, but very few. And the ones that I've seen, um, they've been nice. They've acted more confused, like they're lost, than anything. But I've not detected any negative energy like around where I live, this part of the
Good.
country. Yeah. And so I feel very comfortable here. And I like it that way. Now you can take me to a major city where there's a lot of traffic and a lot of energy. I can just feel it just whoo, and it's too much.
I
It's
used to
hard.
work at a maximum security women's prison, and I used to work at a mental institution. Oh, bad energy.
Oh no, I wouldn't have survived. Nope, nope, nope.
And then I went to work with my husband on the pipeline for a few years. And
Oh,
you talking about the men and how men are and this all
yeah,
this ego stuff they get into. I would just walk away from them and go over towards the woods and just look at the trees and feel the breeze and look at the sky just to replenish myself.
I go out to my garden and I sing to my plants. My wife doesn't know that. She's shaking her head. Oh, good. She has her earphones and she can't hear me. All right. I go out. I put in my Wi-Fi or Bluetooth headphones, and I go out there and play music through my phone, and I'm singing like karaoke, you know, watering my plants. But you know what? I think they hear it.
I have this thing. If I see a tree, like we have like quite a bit of property with woods, and we're out clearing stuff, and I see a tree that's all tangled with, say, modifor rose or something that's pulling it down, I make my husband stop. Instead of cutting that tree down, stop and cut all that off that
Yeah,
tree so it can breathe and grow. I feel motherly
yeah.
over these things. Like, oh my gosh, it needs help. And I feel so good. I feel like it's just like, oh, that feels so much better.
Oh yeah. I can totally relate to that. And see where I live, there's trees grow like weeds. If I don't, I've got like a couple acres out back, and if I don't go out there and cut the saplings down, they just take over. It's like a little forest now. I've been letting it grow, and deer sleep out there. I got wild turkey, pheasant, and unfortunately, too many raccoons. But that's the way it goes.
Oh,
Uh, the reason why the raccoons are a problem is I like to plant fruit trees. Baby fruit trees, apparently the bark is real sweet. So the raccoons will strip off the bark and kill them and eat the bark.
oh,
So I haven't had any luck planting any fruit trees lately. I have to lock them up in a cage, I suppose, to protect them.
oh, yeah,
But yeah, I love living out in the country. It's
I
beautiful.
do too. And I have some guests and they'll say, oh, I'm in California and the weather's so wonderful. Don't be jealous. I'm thinking, are you crazy? That's the last place I want to be is in California or New York. I'll stay right here in Southeast Ohio. Thank you.
Oh, you're in Ohio. I was
Yeah.
going to say, California's got a lot of heat right now, and it ain't good.
No, they can have it. I don't
Yeah.
want that crowd. I don't want the city life at all.
Oh, no, that's the other thing. California's too populated. Yeah. Yeah, I'm about 20 miles away from the Well, no, that's not right. I'm about 10 miles away from the closest town, but they don't really have a grocery store, just a gas station. So I have to drive 20 miles to go get groceries, the real stuff, you know?
Yeah, it's probably a little more than that for us to get to the next Walmart or grocery store. But they have Dollar Generals and Family Dollars
Oh,
around
yeah.
here. So,
Yeah.
and we can a
Yeah.
lot, we freeze a lot, so we don't really have to go to the store much. Just go to Dollar General, get milk or something.
Yeah. It pays to have a freezer and stock it up well. And then we also discovered we can buy an animal like well, I eat meat. I don't know about
We
you,
do
but
too.
oh, okay. So I can buy like a pig from a local farmer and they'll take it to the butcher and cut it up for me and avoid the packing industry and
Yeah.
just go
We had
directly
we
through the
had several
farmer.
cows and several pigs, and some we butchered and some we took back to auction and sold.
Oh, sure. Okay. You get attached to your animals, but you know,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't, if I'm not involved in the actual killing and butchering, I'm okay.
Yes, I've realized that with my husband. I told him a while back. I said, I don't ask me to help anymore with like killing the chickens and the or ducks or turkeys, even deer. I mean, if I see them alive, I can't eat it.
Yeah.
I still have that memory of looking in their eyes because I always like pray with them before they die. I think I'm sorry, but we have to have meat or whatever. And I said, just bring it in after you've killed it, and then I'll package it because I can't.
The only killing I've done really when it comes to animals is when I was little and I had a BB gun, and for some reason I shot a lot of birds, little birds. But my grandparents lived on a farm, and Grandpa didn't like there was like barn swallows, and they would put these nests all over his barn, and they just made a mess. And Grandpa always encouraged me to shoot them, and that and mice, shoot the mice.
Huh.
But now that I'm older, I just can't. I can't purposely kill. I just can't do it. But I eat meat, love it. But
Yeah, we need protein. So,
yeah, that's right.
well, it's been very nice. I'm going to let you go. It's been 2 hours we've been talking.
Oh golly. Okay.
So,
Well,
thank you very
you're
much. This should be ready by tonight, and I'll send it to you as soon as it's available.
okay.
Okay.
Sounds good to me.
All right.
And
Bye bye.
thank you for inviting me. I enjoyed it
You
very
too.
much.
Bye.
Okay.